Hey, welcome to the Indie Beat. Thanks for tuning in. My guest today is no stranger to music, to entertainment. When he isn't out performing in New York City, you're bound to find him hitting somewhere in the Florida Keys. Guitarist, producer, and songwriter Roger Bartlett will be joining me to discuss his most recent recording projects and to share with us a project near and dear to his heart, a tribute to his dad, iconic radio disc jockey Ray Bartlett, also known as Groovy Boy. Roger will share with us fond memories of his dad and his role in the spinning of race music records in Louisiana during the early 50s. Roger will perform for us a tune he has written in honor of his dad, appropriately titled Groovy Boy. And of course, we will talk about his exciting life as a touring side musician with Jimmy Buffett. Thank you, Roger, for stopping by the Indie Beat and for sharing your dad's story with us.
Great to be here. Happy to do it.
Yes, yes, yes. So, KWKH, that's it? The radio station in Louisiana?
Shreveport, Louisiana.
Shreveport, Louisiana. So it's my understanding in the background information that I read on your dad that they moved to Louisiana in 1947.
That's right. He moved up from Corpus Christi, Texas, where he worked for radio station KRIS down there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I was going to ask you, what was his background in coming to the station? How, what prepared him for that position to succeed as KWKH's disc jockey?
When he was a kid in high school, he got a job at KRIS there in Corpus Christi. And then when World War II hit, he joined the Navy and he became a radio man in the Navy. And when he got out of the Navy, he went back to KRIS, and he was very popular there. So, he was offered a job in Shreveport, moved up there, and
a radio man in the Navy. What does a radio man in the Navy do?
Well, you send messages and receive messages, and I guess that's it.
Okay. So this particular radio station, it was founded by a gentleman named William Henderson Jr., a local businessman there in Shreveport, Louisiana, and I understand he was quite a fireball, not the most likable guy.
That was in the 1930s, right?
That was in the 1930s.
That's when Huey Long was a governor of Louisiana. Huey Long was quite a character himself. So.
Right. And was it you who was saying earlier that he was actually assassinated?
He was assassinated.
Oh, because when I read the information, I just figured he passed.
Oh, no.
Okay, but he faded into oblivion, but the station survived a number of years. And then there came along there was a period between, 47 when he passed, and the time that your dad came to the station. Do you know anything about the station during that lull time? Or?
Well, during that interim period, the station was pretty much, a locally oriented kind of station that played mostly hillbilly music, what they call hillbilly music back then.
Okay.
And they'd have morning shows, and they'd have a band, that played the morning shows, and a host that, gave the farm report and, talked about the prices of farm animals and commodities and stuff.
Interesting.
And then they would have, feeds from networks,
Okay, so now your dad, there was a radio program, Stan's Review?
It was in Shreveport. There was a famous record shop owned by Stan the Man, the record man, Stan the record man, and he was big on the mail order records, and his catalog was a lot of rhythm and blues stuff like Muddy Waters and Johnny Otis and Lightnin' Hopkins and people like that. He also had the hillbilly music stuff like Hank Snow and Johnny Horton, and you know. But my dad ran a little program that he sponsored, you know, pitching rhythm and blues records.
He primarily played race music.
Yes, yes.
Right.
Race music was black music then. It was, you know, blues and jump blues and you know, sort of big band kind of stuff. I mean, my dad did play Duke Ellington too, and Cab Calloway, and you know, stuff like that. So, you know, and also during that period, the early '50s, it was a transitional period where the big bands were kind of dying out, and to replace them were smaller combos, and a lot of the race music was very suggestive.
Your father didn't have a problem playing or being known as one to play primarily race music during, yet again, another time in American history when racial relations were, suffice it to say, contentious. And, but he didn't mind, because you have a photograph of him performing at an all-black high school. It was a high school, right?
Right.
And I'm looking at the photograph and I'm thinking, I believe he and his manager, that was his manager?
No, actually, that was another artist, a guy named Red Savine.
Ah, Red Savine. Okay, so I'm looking at the picture and I'm thinking, why, I believe they're the only two there whom are not of African American descent.
I think that's right.
So he was comfortable in that role.
Yeah, he was very comfortable. But, you know, some other people were not comfortable, you know,
Really?
with
So
him playing that sort of music, you know, on a mainstream station, you know. And he would get, I have, you know, letters from listeners to the station manager expressing their displeasure.
But he didn't
at his show.
necessarily bring that music, because Stan was already sort of
Well, but he also
it.
had his own show besides Stan's shows.
Okay.
Stan's show. He had a thing called Boogie Master with Groovy Boy.
Okay, yeah, I did read that.
Yeah, and you know, he got really popular. I mean, Bob Dylan has a new book out, and in the book, Bob Dylan mentions that he listened to my father specifically on KWKH when he was in Hibbing, Minnesota, and he was still Bobby Zimmerman. My dad got over to a lot of people, and his show got really popular. Birmingham, Alabama, you know, hired him over because his show was so popular. So he began playing the same repertoire there, and he got threats from the Ku Klux Klan.
But you know, that's interesting, because you say that on one hand, the show became popular. Then on the other hand, you're saying that he received so many letters of complaint. So it's interesting.
But that was the old guard, you know. The kids loved, you know, the type of stuff that he played. It was the older people who wanted, you know, Patti Page and Perry Como and, you know, Gogi Grant, you know, people like that.
Dinah Shore.
Dinah Shore.
Jimmy Dean. Given the nature of the genres, the diverse range, I should say, in repertoire that was being played, I find that interesting, because you went from this you had songs on a radio station that was being played one after the other. One moment it's a spiritual, the next minute it's this very worldly, secular material. And all of this was on the same playlist being played. How did that work?
Generally, they had like blocks, you know. His show would be a rhythm and blues show, and then the next show that came up would be a hillbilly show. And then the show that came up after that would be a pop music show. And then the show that came up after that, you know, would be something different. So they put a little something different at different times when they thought, you know, in the mornings they'd do a hillbilly show when people were on their way to work, you know. In the afternoons, my dad would do his rhythm and blues show when the kids were getting out of school. You know, so.
Yeah, they did that a lot, and that's how radio was in Kansas City, where I grew up. It was it was blocks.
Yeah.
But the playlist that I saw on the internet, I guess it was like a playlist of some sort that your dad had, and it seemed like all of these songs were just from 1 to 10 maybe, just seemed to have been mixed.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, wow.
Well, you know, they might have been to a certain extent, but generally the idea was blocks. You know, he did several different shows. You know, he had one show where he did a character called the Little Boy, and he spoke in a high voice, you know, and impersonated a kid. You know, and then he would
For
be
the entire show?
Yeah, for the entire show. He'd be him, and he'd be the little boy too. You know, so my dad was quite a character. He had a band for a while. You know,
Really?
they call them the Boogie Masters. And
Now, what instrument did he play?
he didn't play an instrument.
He just had a band.
He just had a band. I'm not sure what he did.
He could have been.
He didn't really sing, but well, I think he had a rhythm and blues band, and I don't know. He was just like the MC, or you know, they were the Boogie Masters, and. You know, they played all kinds of different shows. I sent you a poster of a gig that he played in, I think it was in Marshall, Texas, or somewhere out there in West or East Texas. You know, and since he had a big rhythm and blues crowd, his poster says, "White and colored."
Oh yeah, I saw
welcome."
that. I saw that.
Yeah, so
saw
I mean
that.
that was radical in those days, you know.
That was radical. Seeing your dad in this role as a radio personality, would you say that influenced your passion for music?
Oh yeah, definitely. My dad was also one of the MCs on the show, the Louisiana Hayride, that was a competitor to the Grand Ole Opry, and on that. You know, he did that on Saturday nights, and you know, there were people like Hank Williams was on the show, Elvis Presley was on the show before he met Colonel Tom. In fact, at one point, Elvis asked my dad to manage him because my dad was managing a guy named Slim Whitman, and my uncle taught me to play the guitar when I was 11.
I was going to ask you about that. When did you get the first guitar? And were your parents supportive in you playing? Your mom and dad, were they supportive?
They were, yeah, they were, and until you know, I began to grow my hair long.
So, I understand that you are working on a tribute to your dad. Is that correct? You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, it's going to be a musical. It's going to be set in 1953, and it's kind of loosely based on my dad. And you know, he's going to be a disc jockey and all the drama that associated with being successful as a disc jockey. And but he's also going to be kind of an inventor.
So you're going to perform a song that you've written in honor of your dad?
Yep. I wrote this song on the day of his funeral. He lived in Dallas, Texas, and I was unable to get down there because there was an ice storm, and all the airports were closed for 2 days here. So the day of his funeral, I wrote this song.
So can we hear it?
Yeah, sure.
Performing Groovy Boy, Roger Bartlett.
1, 2, 3, 4. Should I heard his show back in the day? DJs played the songs they like to play. People in the know would tune him in. 4:15, that's when he would begin. Should have heard Goovy's Boogie with Groovy Boy. Should have heard Goovy's Boogie with Groovy Boy. You got a boogie woogie with Groovy Boy, Groovy Boy. He'd tell a joke, he'd play a song. People back at home would sing along. They'd start to dance it never failed. When the radio began to wail, shoulda heard Goovy's boogie with Goovy boy. Shoulda heard Goovy's boogie with Goovy boy. You got a boogie woogie with Goovy boy, Goovy boy. On Saturdays he was Southern fried. He announced the Louisiana hayride. His crazy tricks would bring the crowd around. When he jumped up high, he brought the house down. Shoulda heard Goovy's boogie with Goovy boy. Shoulda heard Goovy's boogie with Goovy boy. You got a boogie woogie with Goovy boy, Goovy boy. So the fans could choose which show was best. The station had a big write-in contest. They sent letters in for their favorite sons. When they counted Goovy boy at one, you shoulda heard Goovy's boogie with Goovy boy. Shoulda heard Goovy's boogie with Goovy boy. You got a boogie woogie with Goovy boy, Goovy boy.
That was wonderful. So who did you ever, in being around your dad, did you ever meet any famous people? Like I have friends.
I did.
Yeah, yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Actually, Hank Williams used to come over to the house when I was a little baby.
Get out.
Yeah,
Okay.
and also, my mom gave Elvis a ride out to a gig that my father was emceeing, and my father, at that point, we had a white Buick convertible with red leather interior.
Snap.
And my mom says that Elvis held me in his lap when I was a little baby when they drove out to the gig, and Elvis looked at my dad and he said, "Gee, Mr. Bartlett, do you think I'll ever have a car this nice?"
Now, you had a nice career as a side musician here in New York, and you did some touring with Jimmy Buffett, and we have a clip of you guys out on the road. You want to tell us about that clip? What's going on in this clip? What's happening?
This is back in 19...
And something.
And we were out touring coastal Alabama, I think, and on our way to Aspen, Colorado.
Oh, okay.
And so, you know, I think we passed by some restaurants, and one of the restaurants, we were used to getting to the gig, and Jimmy Buffett's name is B-U-F-F-E-T-T.
Buffet.
No, T-T, it was Buffett. But we get to the gig and it only have one T, which is what buffet is. And so we drove by a restaurant, and, you know, it said, you know, big buffet here, but it was spelled Buffett.
Oh, my goodness.
So we got out of the bus, and Jimmy went over and stood by it.
Oh, my goodness.
And then there's a little gig that we played, and I believe the gig's somewhere in Alabama.
So how'd you like touring?
I love touring.
I did, too. Touring is wonderful. Don't we love touring? The tour
yes.
bus, the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
Once again, Roger Bartlett performing Things Have Got to Change.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Not gonna let you dog me round no more. Not gonna let you dog me round no more. Things that gotta change, or this dog's out the door. Things that gotta change. Things that gotta change. stays the same. Things they gotta change. Things they gotta change, or this dog's out the door. Not gonna let you talk to me that way. Not gonna let you talk to me that way. Things they gotta change, that's all I've got to say. Things they gotta change. Things they gotta change. Nothing stays the same. Things they gotta change. Things they gotta change, that's all I've got to say. Things they gotta change. Things they gotta change. Nothing stays the same. Things they gotta change. Things they gotta change, that's all I've got to say. I'm not gonna let you send me round the back. I'm not gonna let you send me round the back. Things they gotta change, cause I won't go for that. Things they gotta change. Things they gotta change. Nothing stays the same. Things they gotta change. Things they gotta change, cause I won't go. Things they gotta change, cause I won't go. Things they gotta change, cause I won't go for that.
So Roger, thanks for stopping by and sharing your talent and your time with Indie Beat, the best of you and the Groovy Boy Project. And your dad sounds like he was all that, seriously a groovy guy, groovy kind of guy. To learn more about Roger Bartlett and the life and works of Groovy Boy Ray Bartlett, contact Roger Bartlett online at
RogerBartlett.com.
Be sure to tell your fellow independent recording artists and friends about the Indie Beat and follow the Indie Beat online at Facebook. Remember, the Indie Beat is the place to hear real music by real musicians playing real instruments. No digital drums, no gimmicks, no fluff. Organic music where strong melodies and great lyrics marry. Sounds like you? Holla. And maybe we'll see you too on the next Indie Beat. And remember, all things in time, so keep the beat. Do you have something that you could play us off air with?
I do. It's a song called Smooth Sailing.
Smooth Sailing, I like that title.
Yeah, you probably do because you co-wrote it with me.